going to ask you, don't worry. I will start from Guia. Good morning, welcome to SHOWstudio. This is a very good day. It's the student panel, which everybody knows is one of my favorites. And by the way, it's the last panel of Spring-Summer 19 season. Fashion Month ended last night in Paris with an extraordinary Louis Vuitton show, which, you know, spoiler alert, I really loved. So no, I don't want to put any pressure on you, but I really loved it. I'm going to discuss this with our panelists, they're students. Thank you for being here, and I'm going to ask you to say your name and your school and what you're studying.
I'm Guia. I study in Brighton on the Fashion Design with Business course.
I'm Benaissa. I study fashion print at Central St. Martin's.
I'm Weiqi, and I study fashion creation at LCF.
And I'm Stefan, and I study visual merchandising and branding at the London College of Fashion.
Great, so we have a great panel. Okay, so my enthusiasm again for a little while. Why did I like this show so much? Because I think Nicolas Ghesquière did Nicolas Ghesquière, and I've been waiting for it for a while, ever since he left Balenciaga and he went to Vuitton. Of course, I liked what he was doing, but never as much. And here, I found him, you know, again, in tune with his passions, you know, the futuristic, space age obsession that he's always had, that created the best of his Balenciaga collection. I found him able to touch on this mixture between classic and modern, and the past and the future, you know, already this incredible see-through tunnel, this promenade, as they call it, that was in the around the Pyramide du Louvre, you know, in the Cour du Louvre, so in one of the most classic and historical buildings of Paris, he built this tunnel, which, by the way, made me think also about what Demna Gvasalia did for Balenciaga. So it was quite, this morning I had to think Louis Vuitton Balenciaga, you know, because he's the other one who did, you know, this immersive with an incredible music tunnel. But let's go back to Louis Vuitton. So before we go into the actual collection, I would like to know if any of you hated it or loved it. Who wants to start?
I was personally very surprised because I honestly didn't pay much attention to the previous Louis Vuitton collections, and was pleasantly surprised because this one is really recognizable, is really true to what Nicolas Ghesquière is and what he's interested in and what his work is about. So, and it's also visually really, really like exciting. I don't know if I love everything, but definitely like the last three looks and like the prints are really, really, really incredible. Also like the volumes and, you know, the fact that it's been inspired by the concept of Mirage, and it kind of like pays tribute to the heritage of the brand that started obviously as like the traveling, you know. So.
Yeah, I agree. I think it is really incredible. I also wasn't paying much attention before to the previous Louis Vuitton collections, or I just wasn't like, I didn't care as much as maybe I would. But I think there's some looks in this that I think are more successful, and I wish there was more of. As like a print student, I always look at the prints, and I think some of them are quite questionable, but like for my own personal taste anyway. But yeah, I think that some of the looks, like the last three looks specifically, and like these looks here, I don't know, the kind of like mesh moments, everything that's like very shapely, textured like in an interesting way rather than like I don't know, some of the prints, whenever I was looking at it, I thought it was like rockets. I don't know, I never managed to see like close up what they were, but I was like, if it's like about space and then there's like rocket prints,
They were
actually, like exact.
I looked at the details online, and there were, I guess, some rockets, but also they were images of the world in the past, in the future, a little dystopian. They were like, you know, this ruined planet, like this cut off photos, I guess.
Yeah, I was going to say on some of them, it almost looked like there was some sort of like rock, like geometric formation, and there was like some really, really nice lines.
I don't know if we're seeing this, but that pyramid on the chest of this model, it's what they throw out as a hint online on Instagram. And I thought it was the Pyramide du Louvre, but actually it could be. It's like the same, yeah.
But no, I did find that really interesting, yeah.
Yeah, I think the prints are definitely from like the 80s Memphis graphic design. And I don't know, to me it looks a lot like a nostalgic vision of the future. It's not a very present vision of the future. Like, it's probably what people back then would think we would wear now. When obviously we don't dress like that, but I can definitely see this on the streets in Fashion Week next season. You know, it's very, very wearable, and like you said, it's very Nicola. Yeah.
One thing that it does well, by the way, there is this white coat that it's already my obsession, and it looks like leather, but actually it's crushed rubber, so we can't touch it, but the materials also, you know, are quite innovative. But that said, one thing that is always done when, especially, you know, when he was at Balenciaga, and he was recognized for that, is that he created new shapes. So he created, so sometimes it was a little bit weird. It's like, oh, those trousers are weird, but then that was dictated to the trends and everybody else. So I think in this collection, by referencing Cristobal Balenciaga, much more than anybody who has worked at Louis Vuitton before, he is reinventing some shapes. And there are 3 girls that come out at a certain point, I think more or less in the middle of the show, with suits, and they're very androgynous. There is one, I thought it was a boy, but I think there they are.
Yeah, this one's her.
And you know, those shapes of those trousers, those pants, I think are going to be what we're going to wear in a year.
For sure. Are they girls? I thought they were boys.
I think
one of them is a trans model, I believe.
Fabulous.
Yeah, a trans model and a girl who's very androgynous. But I think that's very relevant. That's very modern. Also because when people say, "Oh, I've done suits for both sexes," not mentioning names, they were not really, while these are. And that's the difference. And I think that tailoring is just quite amazing. But we went into the collection before I talked what I was thinking about talking, and there is one thing I want to go back. You both said I didn't pay attention in the past 5 years. So my question is it because it's Louis Vuitton, the brand, that didn't appeal to you, or what Nicolas did to it?
I think that, like, for me, I was thinking about this morning. Louis Vuitton is a brand that, like, it will always be, like, relevant and, like, prominent in my life, but never for the fashion. It was always for the bags. Like, I'm sure everyone's, like, parents or whatever, like, my mum always had, like, knockoff Louis Vuitton bags. Like, she loved it. Like, she loves it, and it's just always been, like, like, prevalent in my life. But I've never ever, but I've never ever found myself, like, through studying fashion, like, for when I was younger till now, never found myself going and looking at Louis Vuitton collections, like, going to see it, because I just never thought that it was anything there for me, because, I mean, I'm not like, the customer, and also, like, I guess my usual taste is, it's just not what I would never go there thinking to find what I want to find. But this was, as I said, really
this would be
a great surprise, because it was, like, as much as it's not something that I would go out and buy, it was something that I'm interested to see and something that I'm interested to, like, learn more about, to get up close and personal with.
And what do you guys think about this reaction that it's gone on a little bit the whole month to the street and the sportswear? So here, there's no trainers at all. There's not a pair of trainers, there is not a pair of elasticized trousers, and on the other side of Louis Vuitton, there's the master of this. So, I mean, can we talk about the elephant in the room, Virgil?
Yeah, I think it's a really big, I think, juxtaposition between the two. Personally, with like Virgil's show, I think it's awesome to see, like, this style of clothing on the runway and in like high fashion, because I think, like, rewinding maybe like 15 years ago or so, no one would have thought like streetwear would have been on major like Parisian or Italian like fashion runways. But I think there's been such like a cult culture around streetwear, and even you know, looking at like big pop stars and rappers that are, you know, part of these like social circles, and having those people like influence the designers and the designers influence them. I think music has definitely also played into it, but I think it is a bit of a juxtaposition between the two.
So do you think there is a reaction to the streetwear and the sportswear?
Definitely. Like, I feel like this current collection, as a Nicolas collection, it still feels very sporty to me, even though there aren't any trainers. Like, I'm guessing it's probably because of the bombers and the fabrics and the print. Like, it still comes across as very, very street to me, even though it's not in your face street, you know?
And the bucket hats.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Well, that's a reference to Cristobal's Balenciaga. You know, if we have it, yes, well done. You know, this amazing wedding dress that he did in '67, and that has become one of the symbols of, you know, and of Balenciaga, and which has been brought back into fashion by The Handmaid's Tale. So it's a bit creepy and scary, but that's again, you know, I don't know if it's a reference, but I think it is. And I think what you were saying about it's definitely street. I think the genius of this collection, I mean Nicola's collection that we just seen, is that it's exactly that. So it's not street, but it's very young and casual, but luxurious. Am I making sense? I mean, it's all of the above.
Yeah.
I think it's almost post-sportswear because we're so used to integrating, you know, sports items. Like you see so many people in London wearing, you know, those like nylon Nike like trackies, like as like a, you know, as almost like a formal piece of clothing.
Yeah.
And I think we like got to a point where sportswear is so integrated in like our way of dressing that we're kind of like going beyond it. It's like I've been hearing so much discussion around sportswear and fashion. You know, how big house, you know, Balenciaga, for example. Like, but I just think we kind of like reached a point where we went past it with this collection, and it's a really good balance between what we've seen in the past and we can see in the future, and like a new way of dressing almost.
It is, and I think that's the importance of it, like it or not. Aesthetically, as you were saying, some things are not to my taste, but there is an importance
for sure
for the fashion industry at the moment.
I think it's important for Louis Vuitton as well because I think it's important for as like a major fashion brand to still be interesting like younger audiences because because I mean obviously like every brand is like getting in new creative directors and everyone's like trying to like keep up with like who's cool and like what's not, but I think it's important for like even like so this isn't, it's not like Nicolas Guesquer was like put there to be like this like seller like Alessandro Michele or whatever, do you know what I mean? But I think it's important that he's obviously like in tune with like what's going on and putting the like, I don't know, interest back into the brand. And
where you see that he's a great designer and a great creative is that he doesn't do it by trying to be one of those, but he brings back who he actually is, what he's done. Yeah, I would like to see maybe a little bit of the film of the collection, because I don't know if you put your head in headphones and immerse yourself in it, but it's quite amazing. And you will see there are incredible views of this tunnel, promenade, whatever it is, in the middle of the Louvre, the Court du Louvre, and it's the music and the rhythm and everything, the fact that it was night, it was just incredible. I think it was just incredible. Did I say it enough?
It was very like eerie, like extraterrestrial, like feeling when the models, like extraterrestrial, yeah.
Which is what Nicolas Guesquer has done a lot. Balenciaga, you know, he has done space collections, and he's done that a lot. He's always been very futuristic. I remember there was a time where actually he had invented the way of walking. So his shows were much more simple than this, but they were always very wide and very straight with right angles, and so the model had to learn how to walk a la Nicolas, like turning without moving, whatever, you know. Yeah. And that was very, you know, robotic in a way, very, replicant style. Yeah. Look at this, I think it's very beautiful.
The music's nice.
Do they have an agreement with the Louvre? Because I know this isn't their first time showing there. Like
Louis Vuitton has been showing in La Cour du Louvre for some time now. It started with Dior, which obviously is the same group, And then he went to Vuitton, and yeah, I think nobody else can.
Yeah.
That's the power of LVMH. But I'm not sure about the fact that nobody else can now. It was like this for a while. So yeah, they do have an agreement. And about the music, is by this French musician called Woodkid. Does someone know about Woodkid?
Hadn't heard about him.
Sorry.
Interesting.
I'm not the only one here who feels I'm not cool enough to know. Apparently, he's a music video director. He's a composer.
Okay.
He's a singer and songwriter.
Does it all.
And he did a great job here. There is a moment where it becomes almost oriental, fun enough. So there is this Vuitton art of traveling around the world, and then they have these images on their clothes, and then there is this, I think it's dystopian at times.
Yeah. It does feel like...
This is fantastic, look.
I think you had said earlier about how it's like a vision of like the past's vision of the future, and like I completely agree with that. I was thinking that this morning, but also that it's like it also does feel very future. Like some of the looks, I like think this is like what people thought the future's going to look like, but then some of it I'm like, no, that very much like it reminded me of like people that I know and like what they would actually be wearing in like 20 years, like casually.
20 years,
like or something like that. I don't know. It just like something that becomes casual, like shapes that right now would be like dramatic for like fashion students, but then would become very like banal. So I think it has a nice duality of like both, where some of it feels very throwback and some of it feels like it could actually be taken like further.
It's the more I look at this, the more I see many great hits of what he's done in his career, and I keep thinking this is a Balenciaga show. But that's interesting, because if you think about a few of the great designers of the great brand of the moment, a la Balenciaga by Demna, or now Louis Vuitton by Nicolas, or even, like it or not, Celine by Hedi Slimane, they are actually the person more than the brand. And hence then it's a little bit confusing. You're like, why isn't it called Nicolas Ghesquière? Why isn't it called Hedi Slimane? What do you think about that? Do you think that the brand DNA still matters?
I feel like, at least with this collection, because like you guys, I never really closely followed Louis Vuitton, but I feel like with this collection, it's still very true to the brand's themes of travel, and it's a very abstract idea of travel, but it's still true to that history of travel, and like, it's traveling to maybe to space, to the future, but it still has that element very, very strongly rooted in the collection.
I think that the brand DNA still matters, like 1,000%, but I think like that's the challenge that creative directors face. Like it's coming in and having like your own set style of design and kind of like knowing what your codes are and what you're iconic for, but then also where does that meet the brand's DNA, and then how do you like respectively, sort of like transfer that into a collection. So I think it's choosing the right person and knowing sort of like what they're iconic for and kind of what they do really well, and then also how that person will come in and be respective to,
But sorry, I'm going to give you the floor immediately, but I need to say something here. When Nicolas was chosen for Louis Vuitton after Marc Jacobs, I mean, Marc Jacobs, let's say it like this, Marc Jacobs was, as we know, the first one to introduce ready-to-wear to Vuitton, and he was asked to do that, called to do that in the late 90s, when Vuitton needed some recognition in the fashion world. It was already the most powerful brand in the leather goods, but not in fashion. Marc did a great job with that. He was the it guy at the moment. And he created some sort of codes in the Vuitton ready-to-wear, and then Nicolas came, who's very different. I mean, his codes, his fashion are very different, and there was not much. It's a little bit like Philo in Celine, there were not many codes, and so it was quite free. But so then what happened is that here there is a recognition of the codes of the brand in the leather goods. If you look at the bags, there's the little mal, there are. But the fashion itself, does it talk to you about Louis Vuitton? Apart from the traveling and the print, and I agree with you on that, but I think it's more Nicolas Ghesquière.
Definitely. I think if like I think some items like the trainers that he did for Louis Vuitton last season, maybe I can't remember. I think he really translated well what he wants to do into something that the standard like Louis Vuitton client might want to buy. Even like if it's really up there, but like I think even you know, he did the bags with the LV logo.
Yes, that's the first thing he did. He changed the logo and he used the AP leather, which was the most unexpected. It was the most classic and made it so modern and so desirable.
Oh, it's so nice.
These last looks are so good. What was I going to say there? Yes, I think that it's important to like keep the brand's heritage, but then I don't really know what the like signifiers of like Louis Vuitton fashion are. But I do think like this, because obviously it is so resonant of his work at Balenciaga, it really reminded me of the Celine show, because obviously Hedi went to Celine and just did Hedi, like the same that he did everywhere else. And I think that's, I think that this is interesting. That is further than what he did at Balenciaga. It is like a meeting of both, but then it's like, will it continue to be that kind of like everything's referenced in Balenciaga, or like I wonder how that will continue, because I personally don't like that the Celine show was like Hedi doing Hedi at Celine. Like I kind of think that if you as a designer are working for a brand, then you should be doing you, but you should be doing you under the like rules and regulations of other things, because that's what the point is. Do you know what I mean? Otherwise, like you've just went into this brand and like you're using like all of their money to just like ignore what they want and ignore what their customers need or whatever, and just like do your own.
Yeah, but one thing is taking over Valentino or Dior or, you know, Poiret or those brands where the heritage of the designer, the original designer, is so heavy and so important. While, as we said, Vuitton don't have a ready-to-wear heritage apart from what Marc did. But I still remember one of the first Marc Jacobs shows, where you probably were not even born, where those probably 15 girls coming out with the same dress that looked a little bit like a preppy air stewardess gone sexy dress, and it was like in 15 different colors, and it became the dress that everybody needed to have. And it was probably 2000, 2001, I don't remember exactly, but it was, you know, at the beginning of it. So, and that what propelled probably also Louis Vuitton into the fashion world, but there wasn't a heritage for that. The heritage of Louis Vuitton, and they show it to you very much in every store, are still those mal. How do you say mal in English? The
trunks.
The trunks, exactly.
Yes, yeah.
And that logo. So, you know, it's a different thing. So I think here Nicolas has the right to finally say, you know what, actually this is what I am. And he does it by, you know, taking the traveling theme in it, which makes it consistent with the brand, and redesigning those bags. There are some amazing bags in this show.
So good,
There are some incredible.
Oh, they were so good.
But the, you know, the future meets the past, and this kind of music, this kind of atmosphere, and this incredible relevance that goes beyond today, but it's what people will want to do in 6 months. That's Nicolas. That's who he is, you know, and he knows that there are many others now that are coming up and being noticed, and it's like, well, guys, I was there before, and I'm pretty good, actually, in case you've forgotten.
Just one thing, I remember the only one Louis Vuitton show that I remember was the Resort 2017 that they did in Brazil. The really, really big show. And I think some of the tailoring, the really Balenciaga jackets really reminded me of some pieces that he did.
Balenciaga jacket?
Yes.
Yes.
But really reminded me of some pieces in that Resort collection, which I think was really, really successful and really represented him as a designer.
But I think that Resort collection, is it the last one or the one before?
The one before.
I think his Resort collection have been almost more successful than his shows. People have talked and loved more. I wonder why is it? Maybe it was in the middle of the week, so he felt free. I don't know. Because even the last one, I don't know where it was. Where did he show last? In France somewhere. I think it was a very good collection. It was getting to this.
And I think was the one before Kyoto, maybe? Or no, maybe it wasn't.
No idea.
Honestly, can't
Remember? Yeah, I do remember the one in France because I remember the runway being like very.
That was the last one.
Yeah, it was very like complicated and the models were sort of all over the place. But it was a nice palette because there's a lot of nudes and browns, I think, in that collection.
So how do we place this show in the midst of this? I guess you followed a little bit the month. What's your? You can talk about other things, but I mean, it's the end of the whole month, so it's quite incredible because not only we can discuss this, but we know all that has or has not happened. So what's your take on this?
I think it's relevant. I think it's relevant to everything else that's been happening, and I think it's interesting as well because I watched a Balenciaga show and I thought that was also quite interesting because like usually I don't really care too much about like what Demna does because it's just very much like you're always kind of looking at the same thing in a different color, like whatever, different, like something's a little bit bigger, something's a little bit smaller.
Really? For Balenciaga as well?
Yeah, well, I don't know. I don't really pay attention. Like whenever I do, I always feel like I'm kind of like, oh, another suit or like whatever. But I thought that this Balenciaga show was interesting.
Freaking amazing.
Yeah.
It was really consistent, I think, which the past ones were not that much. And I don't know, some of the tailoring pieces really pay tribute to the archive, which has not happened a lot in the past. And there's like a couple of evening dresses, like really, really beautiful drapes. There's a green one, if I can remember. Green.
Oh, green. Can we scroll up? We're getting into green here, no?
No, I can't remember. But even like these shapes, the really big shirts are really, really beautiful. I think he finally found the balance between what he wants to do and what the house is.
Well, exactly. Yeah. That's what I think. I think that and where they show these guys, they show that they're good, is when they finally find the balance between reminding us of their own codes, but within the codes of something else, or the house they work for. And I think Demna rightly, you're right to say he did it in this collection very much. What do you think?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead.
I would
You're
say
being very polite.
I would say, the Balenciaga show definitely got me. I would say that would probably. I'm not sure if it would stand out a little bit more than Louis Vuitton, but coming from like the runway and like even the music and everything else, I think there was just something about it that I think wasn't there probably previously. So I would say it maybe could have potentially trumped Louis if I had to place it in the ranks of Fashion Week being over and kind of seeing what's going on. Yeah. So
was that for you like #1 show of the week?
I would think so. I think Louis Vuitton probably like a close second, but I would say Balenciaga #1. Yeah.
That's interesting. Yeah. But it's also interesting that we discuss these two together. And I don't think we're only doing this because Nicolas was at Balenciaga before Demna. I also think because they probably have, first of all, they work together. That Demna worked under Nicolas in Vuitton, actually. But so quite recently. But also because I think they have the same kind of approach where they're really individual, they just do what they think should be done, and it's becoming a rarity.
I think Demna is like really an interesting person. Like I could talk for hours with friends about like vêtements and like how I hate it, but it's like so important. What it was so important when it started, and like you could talk about like the conceptualities of like. You
said I hate it. Can you define that? Can you explain that?
It was just like trend. It was just such like this is like trend. Like you go anywhere and everyone's got their sleeves down to the floor, and it just felt really pointless. And I think
that Rick Owens did before the sleeves down to the floor didn't impress me as much.
Yeah.
Hold on. Maybe we should each mine first. For me, it's not your fault. It's mine, but I need her to finish her thought.
Yeah, I don't know. I think it was just that it was the vêtement effect. That was like the whole thing, and something with Demna that like I think can sometimes be done really well or really badly is the like irony of his work. And I think that was also something that I didn't like originally with Balenciaga stuff, was that it just felt so ironic, but for me personally it didn't feel like it was like interesting irony. It just felt like silly. But then this most recent show, I feel like it's an irony that's also met really well with like, it doesn't feel like it's degrading anyone that's going to buy it, where I feel like Vetements was like a joke, like against the customer.
Balenciaga too. I mean, his first show for Balenciaga was so incredible, I think. With those,
I like there's some pictures
you
of the
don't
first show
remember
for Balenciaga to remember the first show.
I mean, I understand. I have a different take, but I hear where you come from with the irony for Vetements and almost making fun of the people that were buying it. But I don't see that they did the same for Balenciaga.
I think it was maybe just because it felt so much like the same things from Vetements were in the Balenciaga show. Like it didn't feel like, whenever I first seen this, now looking back at it, I can see the differences, I can see how it was separate, but it just felt very much like, okay, so I've did these kind of jackets and these kind of hoodies, and like we've got these weird suit shapes, so I'm just gonna like put that in Balenciaga and then everyone's gonna gag over it. Like that's what it felt like at the time. It just felt very like, okay, this is what I do here and now I'm gonna do it there.
But you know what? If it sells and if it does well, why not? I mean, if someone is not only creative but also smart.
Like, see this, I hated that. Hold on, could you go back? Yeah, this, really hate this one.
The shirt?
Because it's just like, it just feels like pointless. Like, it's just like it's like charity shop. Like, this is what you buy in a charity shop, but this is it for like thousands of pounds. And that's something that I always find like really difficult with fashion. I found that with Gucci, whenever it first started, obviously the way that Gucci was put together, whenever it was all like getting trendy, it's like very accelerated and like far more than you could put together from a charity shop. But it did very much feel like bits and bobs that were found from different places and then just like plopped on these like girls with like big eyes and like weird glasses, and then it was like, this is like really cool thing now. It's just, I think that it's this weird thing, like this things that you piece together with no money then get turned into like thousands and thousands of pounds worth. I think, I don't know, it's something that like doesn't sit properly with me like about that.
Again, I hear where you come from and I don't completely disagree, except that when you go and see these things and wear them or touch them, they're really better quality.
No, obviously you feel the luxury.
And I think for me the limit was like the DHL t-shirt. That was like, that I don't get. Even DHL tweeted something about that.
But then that was like, that's probably sold like every single t-shirt that was made, and that's kind of, again.
But that for me was the limit that I wouldn't cross. You know? That was, but the styling of what, for instance, Alessandro does for Gucci, the way he puts things together, they look like that, but then the pieces themselves are
separate,
pretty amazing.
Yeah.
I mean, especially those evening gowns that are very expensive and very embroidered, they're like, oh, incredible, you know. And the Balenciaga, those tailored jacket of his first collection and even what he does now, they're quite amazing. And Demna himself said, you know, when I came to Balenciaga, I realized that with much bigger means, I mean, the sky was the limit in fabrics that I could buy and, you know, tailors I had access to. So, but yes, I mean, but that's also responding to what you want, not you, but the street wants. And I think that's freaking smart. I mean, they sell and they make money for their company, for themselves, for the economy, for whatever. So why not?
Yeah.
Sorry, I took over again, so please talk.
I just think the only problem that I had with Vetements is that I remember not even being in fashion education, I was just finishing high school in Italy, and I was reading online about how it really looked like Margiela, and I had an idea of Margiela in my head that didn't match Vetements. So I was researching, and if you look, I think it's the full 2001 Margiela. It's literally Vetements, like the oversized biker jacket, everything, the Levi's is like literally like.
So Vetements is literally Margiela, not really the other way around.
No, sorry.
Okay.
Yeah, Vetements is literally Margiela.
I was like, that's weird. Now it's clarified,
And I think Demna worked for several years at Margiela, so that kind of makes sense. And that's what made me upset, because you kind of just have to go and book runway 10 years back and it's all there. But, you know, it's really smart commercially. I didn't really like it conceptually, but I do really, really love the last Balenciaga show, and I think he's doing a very good job. But also, he's really young, so I think people should give him time, because I think he really found...
He's youngish. I don't think he's that young then, right? Is he in his 30s? Anyway,
but
he's
like,
young, of course, but he's
like,
not 23 years old.
No, of course, obviously. It's just like, it's, of course. But I think he really found like his balance and like his being professional in this collection.
I think he's a very, very clever guy.
Oh, definitely.
And, you know, I'm going to get in trouble for this, but of course he comes from the same school as Martin Margiela. He worked there. That's what he learned, you know, that's what he, and by practically copying it sometimes, that's probably not the right thing to do, but, you know, having some codes, it's a little bit inevitable. However, as you said, I think that now in his, fourth year at Balenciaga, he's getting in his own, you know, people cannot say he's doing Margiela anymore.
No,
Vetements is a different story.
No, definitely.
I think that that most recent Balenciaga show is very much like, I look at that and I'm like, yes, he is a designer, and I don't think that this is like a joke on anyone or on anything, and it's not.
He's a designer,
It's not for like trend. It's not for. It's just not for like an editorial and then just like nothing else. It feels like real close that like people would really want to wear.
It wasn't there to just like grab attention.
Yeah, exactly.
Headlines, yeah. I think too that's why like I liked it so much, because like you were saying, it kind of feels like he found his vibe and he found his groove, and it took a little while, but he did, because like previous to that, I kind of had like Balenciaga previous, but maybe not necessarily like way back, and like maybe what like Alexander Wang was doing, but like I think this was I brought it up,
Couldn't help.
But no, I think this like you were saying, it wasn't just there to like show stop in a way, you know. So.
But also, I feel like it's one thing to rehash a certain period in fashion, but it's also another to rehash it at the right time. So.
Very well said.
So to like re-borrow and reappropriate Margiela's codes from before, like when Margiela did it, it wasn't always well received. Like if you go to the Margiela exhibition in Paris, you really see that Margiela did do it first, but
most of fashion money.
Yeah, but to reappropriate that today at the right time, I think that is a whole nother ability to do that. In a good way too. Yeah.
That's a very interesting point, because I always say that it's as wrong to be too early as to be too late in anything, you know, in a concept, in a style, in whatever. And I also think that, you know, it's like in your wardrobe, sometimes you suddenly take out something that you haven't worn for some years, because in your head that's relevant again. And I think it's the same with designers' inspiration or codes. You know, as you said, it's about how you appropriate in an honest or dishonest way, and when you do it, and why. So, but going back to Nicolas, because that's a Louis Vuitton panel, I think that there is a reaction of these great designers. I do honestly think that Nicolas is one of the great designers of these times, of the past 10 years. And like Miuccia Prada has been of the past 20 or 25 years. And, you know, there are a few great designers that had not become out of fashion at all, because but they were a little bit probably tired of also all these trends that were coming in, and people from the streets, and rappers becoming designers, and art directors becoming designers, you know. And suddenly, and I saw that in the Prada show in Milan as well, it's like they not woke up, but they're like, hang on a second. I'm a designer and I want to show you now what you will want next season or next year. What do you think about it? Do you think I'm completely wrong? Because I don't know, I just feel this, but...
Prada was honest, like it felt, because they've been doing this, bringing back the nylon of like, you know, the 90s like backpacks and stuff, which I don't think was really great. But in this show it was like, all the femininity, but like it's also like a really weird conception of womanhood. And I think it was really true to what Prada is and what Milan is. And I think it was a really, 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 really good show.
I think it was one of her best in the past 5 years. right?
Definitely. It still feels very authentic to what she is, but it's still new. Like Miuccia Prada is like one of like my favorite designers, and I think she always finds a young way of doing things, which is quite.
But isn't that what shows that I'm a designer?
Yeah.
I know how to create the future with my fashion.
Because she's in her late 60s, isn't she? And
Late 60s.
Late
for sure.
60s. But she's still like. What amazes me is that she just does it. She pays tribute to her archive. She's always current, but it's also like a very defined code that. We're like Milan dressing is like the Milan lady is like a very specific way of dressing, but it's just so successful every time, and they're such a big company as well. It's incredible.
And what do you think about the others, about what I said about these people saying, hang on, I'm not a rap artist, but I'm a designer?
I think you're right. Like, I think probably, like there is a lot of like distraction, I think, sometimes in fashion and in pop culture, and then sometimes designers probably feel a lot of pressure to like reference certain things or to kind of, keep up with trends, but then also even looking at like who's spending and who's buying, and maybe, the millennials all of a sudden have like a ton of money and like, oh, okay, we need to like inject some sort of like millennial influences into it, just so that we can get that, keep commercial success. But yeah, no, I think like even like we were saying with Nicola, like it was probably kind of him saying, hey, like I'm back, like this is me, this is what I do, like take it or leave it. But I think there is a lot of intimidation in regards to trying to keep up with things that are relevant in the industry, and sometimes like when collections do come out, people are kind of like, like, is this really what the brand is doing now? Like, or they're underwhelmed, or, whatever. So, yeah.
Yep, I couldn't agree more.
Yeah. Because there's a lot of information too, right? Like with social media right now, it's like everything's so accessible, and everyone's also looking at what everyone's doing, and like you were saying earlier, like all the creative directors are like moving houses, and like this person's here and that person's there, and it's like
they're only as good as the last collection for a house, because commerce is an important thing. But another thing I want your take on is that whenever at the end of the months of the collection you hear, like WWD always interviews the retailer, the buyers of the main retailers in the world, and it's funny that their take on their favorite or what they would pick, and it's obviously professional also in their head, it's often very different than the press ones, the press, the real reviewers and the critics, because they probably know what people will pick up and sell and buy. But I also think that the take of the reviewers, the expert, the press that criticize it, is important to understand the moving forward of fashion, which is essential, to move society forward, to move taste forward, to move then the retailing forward as well. What do you think about this?
Yeah, I agree. I think that it's very interesting. I wish I like knew people that were like buyers or whatever, like professional buyers, because I always wonder like how that whole world works, because I know that the way that things are bought like from collections or like from designers, it is not the way that like you read articles about the collections or whatever. It's like in a very, very different format, a very different like mindset when you're looking at the clothes. And I think that's really interesting. I have no idea how you would look at the clothes to be like, this is what the people want to buy. Like I think you'd need to be doing it for years to really know what the people want.
Yeah, that's a job, and I probably would do it completely wrong, because I would buy everything white for it. But jokes apart, it's very interesting to see the dynamic between the two. It's rather different. And I'm not surprised, because of, again, but these are also people, like if you take the top ones, the Ruth Chapman, or the what's her name, the Bergdorf white hair woman. Anyway, you will come back, sorry. They've been around, they've done it for years, they've been very successful, and they also have a knowledge of fashion, a cultural knowledge of fashion that goes beyond, what you can see on a floor, or they also know what's necessary to have, because they will always buy something that they know will not sell because it's over expensive or over crazy, but they know that by putting it in the window they make a statement.
Yeah.
And so that's, because for me it's always difficult to talk about certain things with my friends that don't work in fashion. Like, how can you say that? Who wears that? You know,
Yeah.
and how do you deal with that? How do you?
I think that this juncture between what the press likes and what the buyers like is really, really interesting, because then how does that affect the designers? Who do you design for then? Do you design more for the buyers, for the consumers, or do you design more for like the intellectual milieu of the current,
What's your answer to that?
What's
your hope?
I personally think that I think it's important to strike a balance, but maybe because as a journalist, I still demand that conceptual backing to fashion. Like, if it's just sellable, I'm not really interested in that anymore. Then what?
Why even show
yeah,
it?
exactly. Then fashion is just another business, you know. And I'm always more inclined to fashion as art, even though I know at the end of the day it is a business, it's a money-making machine. But I still do really, that's what I look at Fashion Week for. You know, I look for concepts, I look for ideas about our current time and what designers have to say about that. Yeah.
I think it's one of those things where it's two very separate routes. Like, the buyers need to do what buyers do, and the press need to do what press do. And I think, like you were saying, it's important for the press to be pushing those more, conceptual ideas and saying, okay, this is what's trendy, X, Y, Z. And I think it's also important for the buyers to be looking at this going, okay, well, we're buying X number of months ahead. Like, will our consumer be reading these things? And if they are, is this then what they're going to crave? And once they can kind of map that out and go, 50% might, 50% might not, then that will probably then hopefully influence the buying, the buy. But I think, it's important for the press to be doing what they do and the buyers to be aware of kind of everything else that's going on, because you have to stay really objective when you're buying. You can't be buying, like you were saying, stuff that or stuff that you really, really like. And that's why I think I could never be a buyer, because I would just be buying for me.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't be thinking about, the masses or the larger population or whoever it is that's actually going to be looking at the product in a specific environment, in a specific city, with all of these things happening around. So.
What do you think?
I think that I don't know, for me personally, the best designers, the most successful as designers for me are people that know how to do the concept and the commercial, kind of half and half.
Exactly.
There's a lot of different brands that I've seen the collection and then forgotten about everything, and then it comes out Instagram, oh, it's online, and I go on the website and I'm like, oh, this is actually a very, very, very well done, buyable, wearable transition from the collection. I'm sure if you wanted the actual collection, you could call them and you could get it, but they understand how to analyze their own work and make it more available for the general public, for the consumer, for the buyers, for everyone. So that it's the happy medium. That's something that I kind of always try and think about whenever I'm trying to do my own work as well. Is that at the end of the day, it's great. We're all students, and whatever. If you're a design student, you should be doing the craziest stuff that you can because you're a student. But I always think at the end of the day, this is great for the picture and it's great for the moment. It's great for the crit. But will I want to wear my own work after the crit? I need to think about that because I want to.
It's not seen in the street. It's not relevant. I remember Nicola saying that a long time ago to a journalist. I don't remember who, but he said, "What I want is to see what I do on women in the street, because if I'm not relevant, I don't matter." But another thing, and going back to Louis Vuitton again, is that I noticed in these past 5 years of his tenure there. There were some things that we would see on the catwalk, very interesting, but I could never see them in any window stores. Not that I go to many Vuitton stores, but in the airports when you have time, or when you walk down Bond Street or the Bond Street of the cities in the world and you have time, I make a point to go into a Vuitton store and it doesn't look anything like Nicolas Ghesquière works for this brand, and that's weird.
Then maybe it's too, not aggressive, I don't know if that's the right word. Maybe it's too stylized for the general Louis Vuitton customer. I don't know who that would be, but I don't know, in my opinion, like, again, because of my mum and everything, I like have this image of like who the Louis Vuitton woman is, and it's just this like, she's just like a regular girl, she wants a bag. And
where will I buy that white crushed rubber coat that will be my obsession from here to eternity? I mean, if they don't even make it, yes, seeing it there and discussing it there, and it will be probably discussed by the press, of course it will push boundaries and whatever, but I need to see it, at least on me. You see what I mean? It's like, it's if you go into a Vuitton store and it really looks like a middle-aged woman who's quite boring and rich.
yeah.
But then you have this like, there's.
Sorry.
It's so interesting hearing
That
this
wasn't very
as a visual
politically
merchandising
correct.
student.
Really?
I said it's so interesting hearing this as like a visual merchandising student, because I'm even looking at that white coat and I'm like, how would that sit against like a Louis Vuitton store?
Yeah.
Like it's just like,
Doesn't make any
It's
sense.
such a confused narrative.
Yeah.
Like, I went to Selfridges a couple of days ago, and just the store setup is just so confusing because you have clothes all over, and then you have a little mallette with like all the perfumes, and they're really classic. But then you have the sneaker that's really futuristic against the classic like Louis Vuitton like monogram bag, and it doesn't make sense. And like if you go anywhere else, like just next to it is obviously like Chanel, and it's like really well thought out and like really makes sense. It's like a whole world. I think that maybe like the accessories, like leather goods department and the design department should like communicate a bit more.
Yeah.
Because it really like even like the visual merchandising and the actual store doesn't really make sense.
But that, what you saw in Selfridges is a concession. That store is managed and owned by Vuitton, so it's their visual merchandiser. So it's not Selfridges.
No, exactly. That's what I'm
That's
saying.
what you said.
Yeah. Sorry. It can,
But also, you know, like these collections are not in store at all. You can't find them.
you have a
So-
couple of pieces like a trouser, maybe like some knitwear.
Yeah, the bag's fine, but
yeah.
that coat. Anyway.
I think that this collection definitely is like a good opportunity. Like, I mean, I don't know if this would ever happen, but like for maybe the stores to have like a rebrand with the visual merchandising, like,
or even some sort of like pop, like maybe not even a pop-up, because I feel like that word's like just really used, like it's like overused now. But like because like in this environment, like that coat or that bag could sell, like in that catwalk with
Absolutely.
that light. You know, it's a look, but in, like we were saying, with that white coat in a traditional LV store on like Bond Street or New Bond Street, it's.
I think they need you to intern there.
yeah.
Take notice, Louis Vuitton. I have to close, and I want to say thank you very much. You were fantastic. And so we're ending our panel season here. We'll be back soon with Head to Head. So goodbye.